Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2019 Brain Health Online Summit. I am Amy Zellmer, founder of Faces of TBI, and myself, along with Dr. Jeremy Schmo at Midwest Functional Neurology Center, we saw a need in the brain injury community for more education and awareness around brain injury. And so we created the summit as a way to bring you together with professionals and survivors. And each week during the summit, you're going to hear from either a brain injury survivor who will share their experience living with a brain injury, or a provider and you will hear their experience treating brain injury patients. And today I am here with Dr. Titus Chiu, and he is a best-selling author, award-winning international speaker, and a functional neurologist who is on a mission to transform the face of healthcare for the millions of people around the world struggling with post-concussion syndrome. Dr. Chiu is the co-founder and clinical director of Koba Family Wellness, a functional medicine center located in Berkeley, California, that specializes in helping people struggling with post-concussion syndrome, anxiety, and other chronic neurological conditions get well and stay well through personalized brain wellness programs, online masterclasses, and immersive brain camps. He has a deep passion for teaching and had the honor to present at the 2017 Institute for Functional Medicine's annual International Conference on the Brain. He was also a featured expert on Dr. Mark Hyman's groundbreaking documentary, Broken Brain. He is the #1 best-selling author of Brain Save, the 6-week plan to heal your brain from concussions, brain injuries, and trauma. So welcome to the summit, Dr. Chiu. So happy to have you here. It's a real treat.
Yeah, you're very welcome, and thanks for having me. And it's interesting because when you were, going into that intro about the Brain Health Summit, everyone out there is going to be hearing from people who have suffered from head injuries, as well as doctors and practitioners who treat people with brain injuries. And I actually fall into both categories.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, that's what's so exciting is to hear from a practitioner who has been on both sides of that coin. And so I'm really excited to jump into your talk today,
Cool.
Which we are calling 5 Things I Did to Heal from My Concussion. So why don't you go ahead and give us, a little bit of your background, and then we can kind of get jumped into your topic.
Great. Sure. So my name is Dr. Titus Chiu, and I'm a functional neurologist that specializes in post-concussion syndrome. And so I got into this through quite a long story, but I'll shorten it for you guys. Over about 20 years ago, I was in a really horrible car accident that almost took my life. I was on my scooter on the way to work one day, and I was hit by a car. And so the impact was so strong that I got thrown through the air like 10 feet, landed on my body, like broke my ribs. Thank God I was wearing a helmet, because I do recall like when I kind of caught my breath after the impact. Even though I was wearing my helmet, I realized that from the impact, it had actually flown off. Wow. It was that strong. And I had the buckle on. And so the interesting thing though, like after that injury, like the biggest symptoms, the biggest things I was struggling with were chronic pain. Like I had broken my ribs, I had dislocated my shoulder, and I really had a bad neck injury. But I didn't have a lot of the typical concussion symptoms. I didn't have like light and sound sensitivity. I didn't have like a lot of headaches or dizziness or balance issues. And so I thought that it was, at the time, I thought it was just a musculoskeletal injury, right? And so I tried a lot of things in conventional medicine and nothing worked. And it was until that point that I almost gave up that I decided to visit a chiropractor. And thank God at the time, my brother, he was a practicing chiropractor. So when I went back home, I got a few adjustments from him, and that pain was just gone. It just blew my mind. And so from there, my personality is one of just like, if something really impacts me that deeply, it's like, I want to know more about it. how I can learn how to do that for other people as well. And so I just kind of shifted gears. I finished up my job in Japan, teaching English, and I came back home and dove right into chiropractic school. And from there, though, when I was in chiropractic school, I discovered neurology, and I just fell in love with it because it was such a wonderful framework to understand why, the things that we do work as chiropractors, and also just from a more philosophical standpoint, just kind of like understanding why we do the things we do in life in general and what makes us tick. And so I just dove deep into neurology and went through a specialization course. And I ended up eventually teaching for the same institute that Dr. Schmo was teaching for. And so through this whole process, I really learned a lot about healthcare and natural healthcare, but also neurology in general. And I would experiment. I'd go to these seminars and I'd learn about these different techniques and different diets and all these things that were just mind blowing to me at the time because I was so not in that world of natural medicine whatsoever. And so I would experiment with changing my diet and taking some supplements. And what was just even more mind-opening for me was a lot of symptoms that I had before that car accident. Like I had I'd get sick all the time. I didn't have a lot of energy. I didn't have much gusto or motivation. I had really bad skin. All those things just cleared up just by changing my diet, getting regular chiropractic adjustments. And that to me was just wow, not only did I have the experience with my brother, but then I started experimenting, and then I was this stuff really works. And so the interesting thing though, like I said, when I was in that massive car accident over 20 years ago, it was musculoskeletal, meaning I had chronic neck and shoulder pain and, discomfort, but I didn't have the typical post-concussion syndrome symptoms until about, I would say, 5 years. It's kind of hazy because it came on really gradually. After the car accident, about 5 years, I started to develop these more psychological symptoms like anger issues and even developing kind of paranoia in situations. And I was just so confused because growing up, I had never struggled with any of that. I was raised in a really great family, loving family. I had really great support system and friends. And I never had these anger issues or paranoia, And so I was really confused as to what was happening because it wasn't one day I woke up with this. Over time, things just started shifting in my personal life. And I talk about this a lot in my book. It's on one level, my professional life on the outside was just wow, this guy's flying all over the world, giving talks to doctors, and he's running a successful practice. But that was just one level. But underneath it all, my personal life was falling apart, and I didn't even understand why. And so at that time, I started to see a lot of patients, that I would run the protocols with, the typical protocols that I learned in chiropractic school, that I even learned in the more advanced functional neurology and functional medicine courses, and they wouldn't get better. They'd come to me with some chronic issue like chronic pain or headaches or anxiety, chronic fatigue, and they wouldn't get better with the typical protocols. And so I just went deeper into their history, and I saw a couple patterns, but one of the most common pattern after I analyzed and really sat down and scratched my head, what's going on here, was that they had a history of one or multiple concussions. And so it was that point, again, that kind of I don't know, curiosity was sparked again. It's I need to figure out what to do for patients with concussions. So I dove deep into the world of concussions, attended seminars, read books, read articles, and just dove deep into that world. And just like I had done before, what I had learned from my patients, I also started to experiment with my own health. So I got really clear and clean with my diet, specific to brain health. I started upping my supplement dosages. And then I started doing more yoga and meditation and all these things that I recommend for my patients, as well as these advanced therapies that we do in office. I started doing on myself. And it was crazy, like the brain fog, the anger issues, the paranoia just started to melt away. And it was at that point that I realized that this post-concussion syndrome specialist, had post-concussion syndrome. And it was just like this light bulb came off, and I was like, and that's what really motivated me to write my book, because it is such a silent epidemic. Even like a brain expert like me, that's what I do every single day, work with patients with post-concussion syndrome and anxiety and chronic fatigue and brain fog. I didn't even realize that all those symptoms that were developing were as a result of that concussion. And it's just, I'm shocked, because it's like, I think it's just, there's not enough public awareness. And that's why I think what you and Dr. Schmo are doing are just so fantastic, is because a lot of the patients that I've worked with, they don't even realize that the head injury that they had maybe when they were 9 or 10 years old, or maybe like this whiplash car accident, and now they have like these chronic health symptoms, they're not aware that that's the root cause. And that's one of the main reasons why I wrote my book, and I do what I do, and I've put together like a bunch of resources for patients to educate them so they can learn how to take control of their own brain health.
So I have a couple questions, because you touched on a few things there.
Yeah.
These patients that you know, when you were digging into their history and found out they had prior concussions, did you have to dig really deep? Like, were they concussions that they kind of had forgotten about? Mm-hmm. Or was there like definite, like you said, like car accident, where they knew that they had one, but didn't know that these were the symptoms from it?
Great question. The answer is yes. It was both, you know.
That's what I expected.
Yeah, especially like the latter, like when it was kind of like, because when I take a history, I don't just look at what happened like in that short time period. I go deep. Like I talk about like, you know, birthing and all these things go way back, because a lot of unresolved health issues is because it's an accumulation of traumas over time. Right. And that becomes embedded in our nervous systems. And if we don't release them, then typically the trajectory is it gets worse or it doesn't get better. Right. So like when I take a history with my patients, I go deep, and I'll start with kind of around that time period. So it's pretty straightforward. What I found was sometimes, they'd be like, I was in this huge car accident, or I got hit in the head really hard. And then from there, all my symptoms developed. And that's straightforward. But then once I started to, like I explained before, sit back and just for the patients that I wasn't able to help, it's like, and I was just thinking about, it's like, what's going on here? What's the missing piece? When I realized that this kind of one of the most common through lines was a concussion, then even for the patients who, you know, come to the office and say, you know, I've been struggling with light and sound sensitivity or anxiety or chronic pain and dizziness, and I don't know why, I'll push the issue. I'll be like, are you sure? Mm-hmm. I mean, because a lot of people think that in order to have a concussion, you need to like this massive blow to head and you get knocked out. Like even me, when I got in that car accident over 20 years ago, I didn't like smash my head and like, but it's like, it was strong enough. My helmet got thrown off, but I didn't even think about that. I didn't consider that as a root cause for my symptoms later on in my life. And
were you hospitalized?
I was taken to there's actually a funny story about that, but I'll save that for another time. But like after it happened, like I was in Japan. And so, and so what they did, they came, the ambulance came and they took me to the hospital. They ran all the tests. They did an x-ray and I had broken ribs, but I didn't even tell them like, oh, you know, because I didn't have any concussion symptoms at the time. I didn't have headaches. I didn't have light sound sensitivity. I didn't feel nauseous. I didn't have any of that. And so they didn't really do like a brain scan or anything, brain scan. And so I wasn't hospitalized per se, but they brought me and then they made sure that I was like stable medically, and then they released me. Mm-hmm. And so that's why that was part of it. It's just, I didn't even realize what I was dealing with,
Yeah. And I think as we bring more awareness, and like this is the perfect topic, you know, like as we bring more awareness to this, like you might have a 40-year-old patient come in with these symptoms, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you dig, well, when I was 9, you know, I like fell off something and hit my head and was unconscious for 20 minutes, you know, but back then, it didn't even, you know, I have a friend just last year, her son fell. He was 5 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
He fell off of a fence, landed on cement. He was unconscious for about 10 minutes. They rushed him to the emergency room.
Wow,
Emergency room said, you know, follow up tomorrow with your GP. GP told him, oh, you know, he's good. He doesn't have any concussion symptoms. He's good.
Mm-hmm.
And I reached out to her and I was like, just keep an eye on him. She's like, nope, the doctor said he's fine. And I was like, you know, and that's the struggle we're facing.
It's huge. Yeah, you bring up a great point, because it, like with concussions, like symptoms like post-concussion syndrome, it doesn't necessarily have to like rear its ugly head right away. Like for me, it didn't until like many years later. Right. And with a lot of patients, some patients, it's like pretty straightforward. I had this head injury and now my life is falling apart. Like, help me, right?
That was me.
Yeah, right. But some patients, and sometimes that's great, because then it's like, okay, this is what we need to work on. But I find a lot of patients, it's like they might have had that, but they're not taught by their doctor or whatever, like whatever they read, that the symptoms can develop like weeks or months later from the injury. I have a lot of patients who like, one of the biggest values, I guess, I bring to their like whole journey is just like being able to identify that, yeah, actually now we tied it all together. That is a really big, you know, trauma that was at the root cause for a lot of your symptoms. And then we go deeper into that. But it's like, if doctors aren't aware, if patients aren't aware, then how are you going to even get to the root cause or understand what to do about that? So again, I think what you're doing with the summit is fantastic. And that's what I've done with my book and my website, is just to really create these resources and educate. So again, people can, number one, know what's going on. So then they can know who to go to. And then number 2, they can really start to learn how to take control of their own brain health for the long run.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and that particular friend whose son fell, you know, she didn't want to listen to me, and you know, I'm not going to push it, but the problem is, so that kid's 4 or 5, right? Mm-hmm. When he gets into school, maybe it won't even be till middle school where he maybe is struggling, like, but they think that he has a learning disability and they forget about that concussion that he had.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's where I think if we get this awareness out there, you know, to teachers, to medical providers, to parents, it's really going to change, I think, the way we treat a lot of things that I think are misdiagnosed currently.
Absolutely. And again, that's such a great point, because I've worked with, especially that group of patients I told you initially, that small group who are just not responding to the typical treatment protocol. It's because it's a different beast. It's a different, we need a completely different approach. If someone has like ADHD to a neurochemical issue, if someone has anxiety due to some emotional issues, if someone has brain fog just because, I don't know, lifestyle stuff, that's a different approach. Each individual person with those symptoms needs a different, like, personalized treatment plan, and versus the patient who has those symptoms from a concussion. It's a completely different process. There's different workups, there's different treatment protocols, and there's different follow-ups. So that's a really, again, that's such a great point, because if patients, if parents, if doctors aren't aware of this, then how can we even put the people, you know, get them in the right direction as to what to do about it?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, like you just said, like a child who has ADD or maybe has a learning disability, but the actual underlying cause is a brain injury.
Yeah.
The Ritalin and the other ways of dealing with that child aren't going to be effective because they're not treating the root
cause. They might help temporarily, but in the long run, it's like, what are the side effects of that? What are the consequences of that? And even more importantly, it's like, what's going on with the things that are actually causing the ADD, the focus issues, the anxiety, whatever, in the first place? because you can use a medication. I think medications can be important in certain situations, but just as important is all along, like the whole process to dig deeper into understanding why a person has those symptoms in the first place.
Yeah. So, Dr. Chiu, you, with your own recovery, you had about 5 things that you addressed and changed in your life.
Sure.
Why don't you take us through those and how they've helped you? And I assume you use these same strategies with your patients.
Yeah, absolutely. So in answer to your second question about using the same strategies, a lot of what I did kind of lays the foundation for the more patient empowerment stuff that I'm trying to get out there, like the things that people can kind of do on their own to get the process going. But in addition, I don't want to trivialize the importance of being seen by a specialist, right?
Absolutely.
I think because the reason why I speak to this is because I think a lot of patients that I've worked with over the years become disillusioned by the medical system. They go to doctors and they're written off, right? They're like, oh, it's all in your head. Stop making it up. Take these antidepressants, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it's unfortunate, And so the reason why I'm saying this though is because just because you've tried something, you've tried, gone to like a conventional doctor or even maybe with an alternative and haven't found an answer yet, doesn't mean there aren't people out there that totally get what you're going through and understand how to help you through it. So I just really want to make that point, kind of like a disclaimer. But that being said, there are a lot of foundational things that people can do to start, getting their lives back and getting on the road to recovery before necessarily, or maybe in conjunction with like more advanced therapies. And so that leads me to, my story. And I kind of alluded to some of the top things that I did to really turn my health around. But before I get into the details, I just really have to say the number one thing I did, not in terms of actions, but that really shifted everything, was my mindset shift. Meaning it wasn't until I made a commitment to my health that I said, no matter what, I'm going to commit and make these changes. That's when everything started coming together. Because, I know through my training, like in neurology and functional medicine, nutrition, and all these different modalities, I know the things that need to get done. But even then it was like, I didn't realize, number one, that I had a concussion. And then number two, I didn't realize the importance of making the changes were. But once I had that understanding, and then I made the decision like, okay, I need to take action, that's when everything started to shift. So once I made that mindset shift and committed to my brain health, everything started to fall in place. And then it's when I did the top 5 things that those became really effective, because not only did I do it, but I was then consistent with it. So the first thing I did, like I mentioned earlier, was I changed my diet. So before my head injury, or before becoming aware that I had suffered a concussion, I made some dietary changes. I learned about gluten and dairy and food sensitivities. I just learned about that. And so I went about 80% gluten-free and dairy-free, right? And a lot of my other symptoms improved, like I mentioned before. But it wasn't until I went like 100% and I removed gluten and I was just really strict with it, 100% removed dairy, was really strict with it, that my life started to change. A lot of that darkness and like the paranoia really started to lift. And so that to me was just like, wow, like 80% for me was not good enough. And so I had to up it. And I'm not saying that I eat 100% gluten-free and dairy-free all the time, but the times that I revisit that, kind of just poison, so to speak, that the times that I do now, like I feel it, but so every time that I would go like 100% gluten-free for like 3 months and I felt fantastic, right? And then I might revisit it and have like a cheat day or whatever, have some pizza because I love pizza. And then I would just fall apart. And the blow from that, you know, just like the consequences of that just came to a certain point where I was just like, you know what, it's not even worth it anymore. I don't want to feel like this. And so when I do have it, it's just like I'm very intentional with enjoying it, like totally enjoying it when I have it. And then also realizing, you know, I'm probably not going to feel good for the next few days. But what in the past, what would happen was I didn't even know that it was impacting me. So I'd have it every single day. I'd eat gluten a little bit here and there, or dairy here and there, and it all added up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now what I do, if I do have it, I'll eat it, and then I'll give my body a chance to recuperate, and I won't continue doing it, maybe revisit in a month or 3 months. So that's the first thing, is really getting clear on my diet with gluten and dairy. I'd love to go deeper into like the ketogenic diet. That's something I also experimented with that really, really made a huge difference for me. Not only just when I did it, but like it really helped stabilize my brain cells. So there's not enough time to go deeper into that, but there's a ton of resources on my website, on other people's, about the ketogenic diet. So that's another thing I did. So number one was just really getting clear as to what, like, in terms of diet, what worked for me and what didn't. The second thing I did to take back control of my health and really heal my brain was to really get specific as to the supplements that my brain needed. And so when I told you, when I went through chiropractic school and through functional medicine training and neurology training, I learned about nutrition and I learned about the importance of supplements. And so I'd take kind of like a baseline, like a multivitamin. I'd take some fish oils, and I'd take like some probiotics and vitamin D, especially when I lived in Chicago with those winters, as you know, Amy, being in Minnesota.
Yeah.
But so I took some foundational supplements, but like I said, after I went through like the deeper concussion seminars and the research, I got really specific as to other supplements, and not only just adding more supplements, but increasing the dosage and the consistency of the supplements. So one of the most important ones, as everyone probably knows about, is docosahexaenoic acid, or DHA. And DHA is really important because not only does it help, the synapses and synaptogenesis, meaning the connections between your brain cells, it also activates what we call BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is really important to help drive what we call neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is the miraculous phenomenon that gives people with concussions hope. Because of neuroplasticity, we have the ability to reconnect and heal any areas of the nervous system that has been injured. And so a big important way of doing that neurochemically is by the use of fish oils, specifically DHA. In addition to that, just through lab testing, I was able to identify what my other nutrient needs were. I needed support for my gut health. I actually discovered I had a H. pylori infection in my digestive system that was creating systemic inflammation and impacting my nervous system. Through lab testing, I also identified that I had other nutrient imbalances related to like B vitamins and what we call homocysteine, which is a pro-inflammatory amino acid. I had pretty high levels of homocysteine because I have what we call a single nucleotide polymorphism of the NTHFR gene. And so that doesn't allow me to utilize B vitamins. If what I'm going into for our audience is really technical, don't worry. The point is, because I used specific lab testing, and if you go to a doctor that gets that, then you can get a personalized supplement protocol to really tailor what your neurochemistry needs, just like I did for myself. So that was the second thing, is, really personalizing my treatment, my supplement protocol. The third thing I already alluded to just a second ago is lab testing. So I actually ran lab tests to identify my unique neurochemical imbalances. And then with the support of targeted supplements and diet recommendations for myself, I was able to really dial in what I call the chemical brain. I was really able to support my neurochemistry, so then that would allow for neuroplasticity and healing to occur. So the third thing I did was just run personalized lab tests, specifically functional medicine testing, like advanced testing that looks at what's actually happening in a person's gut microbiome, or what's happening with a person's hormone levels like cortisol and cortisol rhythms, and even sex hormones like estrogen, testosterone, progesterone impact brain health and recovery from concussion. So everything that I did for my patients, I then gave myself. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna, give this to myself too as a present to, like, invest in my own health. And actually, really, I want to speak to that point. Another major mindset for me that allowed my healing to happen, in addition to all these technical steps I'm listing, is realizing that I was worth it. Like I was worth being able, taking care of my own health. I took care of so many people and their health for many years at not really taking care of my own health. And it wasn't until I realized, I'm like, you know what, I'm worth it. Like, I'm going to invest in my own self-care and my healthcare. And then I had that mindset shift of, now I'm going to commit to this process. And so from there, I went into the top 5 things, like number 1, really getting clear on my diet. Number 2, personalizing my supplements. Number 3, investing in, functional medicine lab testing. So then I can get a clear snapshot of what nutrients my brain needed. And then from there, the 4th thing that I did, like I mentioned before, I really started to up my meditation practice. And meditation, I'm going to strip it of all its ties to different spiritual practices and whatnot. Like it all the scientific research out there says, regardless of your, religious practice or spiritual practices, meditation is fantastic way to retrain and rebuild your brain. Yes. And I talked about this a second ago about neuroplasticity. The fancy term for it is experience-dependent neuroplasticity. And there's ways of creating, changing the structure of our brain so it changes who we are, literally. And in terms of the symptoms that we're struggling with, but also our mindset, our beliefs, and how we show up in life. And so through my research, I've identified 2 major ways to get really specific with experience-dependent neuroplasticity. Number 1 is through this practice of using your brain to literally retrain your own mind, right? You use your brain to create neuroplasticity, which is one of the most amazing things ever, right? And so using something like meditation and mindfulness practices can really be a powerful way for you guys, but it was a huge step for me. And the cool thing about meditation, the research that I've done, different types of meditation activate different neural networks, like right side of the brain versus left side. And so it's all about really understanding which areas that you need more support with, so then you can do the appropriate meditation to drive the experience-dependent neuroplasticity. The second way to drive neuroplasticity, is a little tangent, is through the senses. And that's a big part of what I do in my practice. By using the sense of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, vibration, proprioception, I can target very specific neural networks in my patients' brains based on what's going on with them, their symptoms and the root cause for their symptoms. Because as you know, Amy, treatment needs to be totally personalized.
Yeah.
So that's actually leads into the 5th thing that I actually did. In addition to meditation, the 4th thing that I did to help retrain and heal my neural networks, I started to do a lot of the therapies that I use on my patients on myself. And that's all based on sensory-based therapies. It's the whole realm of functional neurology, what I used to teach, or I still teach, both professionally, but also my passion now is to really educate the general population about these awesome, technologies that exist to really help them take control of their own health. So the 5th thing I did was start to retrain my brain, not using meditation or other cognitive-based, approaches, but by using my senses. And so what I mean by that, so for example, practicing things like yoga. When you do yoga and you work on certain core postures and poses, one of the key areas of your nervous system you're driving is the cerebellum, as well as what we call the vestibular system. two key areas that I found almost all patients with concussion need support with. Right. In my book, I talk about the top 5 regions of the nervous system that are impacted in concussion. 2 of the biggest ones I've seen across the board. I can almost say, like, with 100% certainty, if you've had a concussion, there's something going on with your cerebellum as well as your inner ear. So anyways, a practice like yoga, anything you do to train your balance, really helps to drive neuroplasticity in the cerebellum as well as the inner ear vestibular system, what we call the parietal insular vestibular cortex, all the way down to like the crystals in your inner ear. There's a whole pathway from here to your brain that gets activated when you practice things like yoga or Pilates or functional training, anything that challenges your balance. So I still do, I skateboard, and that's actually a fantastic way of retraining the vestibular system. So I'd start skating again, and I'd get really specific because I'd become really aware. It's almost like I was doing a neurological evaluation while I was skateboarding. I'd be skateboarding, and I'd be like, this feels a little bit more challenging when I'm going in this direction. So guess what? I'm going to go in that direction. And the more I did it, I knew I was developing neuroplasticity in my inner ear parietal insular vestibular cortex. And so those are just examples of things I did. Then I upped my yoga game. I started doing more, balancing on my left because it's my left cerebellum that needs more support. So if I would do like tree pose or whatever, I'd do both sides, but I'd focus more on the left until I got more balanced. And those are a lot of the at-home things I give my patients and I talk about in my book, but that I also give my patients in addition to the more advanced therapies that we offer is these sensory-based exercises. I call them at-home brain save exercises that anyone can do to literally use their 5 senses. Well, there's more than 5, but use your common senses to retrain your brain. So that was the 5th thing I did. So to recap, number 1, I got really clear as to what my brain and my body needed for diet, and gluten-free, dairy-free, low sugar, ketogenic was really what I needed. Number 2, I got specific with the supplements I needed, and I was able to do that through number 3, investing in functional medicine testing, because then I could identify, okay, here are the weak links in my neurochemistry, right? And then number 4, in addition to all that, I started to practice, or not practice, I was already practicing. I upped my meditation game because I used my own mind to drive neuroplasticity. And I was very specific as to the type of meditation I did to drive the area of the nervous system that I wanted to heal. And finally, number 5, I used sensory-based therapies and at-home brain save exercise to target the specific regions of my cerebellum, of my inner ear, of my frontal lobe that needed that support. So those are the 5 things that I did to really help heal my own brain. And the thing was, it took years for me to put that together, right? Because number 1, I didn't even realize I was struggling with a concussion. But the good news is, I tell this to all my patients, it's like, don't worry, I've been through it. I've done the trial and error on myself. I've worked with countless patients over the years. So because of that, I can accelerate the process. And we do these, you're probably familiar with the idea, but we have these 5-day immersive neuroplasticity treatment programs, what I call Brain Camp, where people fly in from all over the world. And what I've discovered is, like, I used to work with patients, I still do, but like these more extended treatment programs, like 3 months or 6 months. And over the course of 3 or 6 months, if I was able to identify the root cause and they took action, guess what? There would be improvement.
Yeah.
But then when I started doing these brain camps, and I've been doing it for many years now and really fine tuning it, what I found is that 3 or 6 month time period can be accelerated and the results can be seen in 5 days, which is just amazing. It's just like, it's so exciting to see that happen. And I just want to put it out there. It doesn't mean that everyone that does a brain camp is going to come out of that like 100% recovered.
Right.
But if their trajectory was like this, or even like this, or maybe like this going downwards, we get them up here. in 5 days, usually, right? Everyone's different. Or if they're kind of just not getting better, but not getting worse, we get them a little better up here, right? Versus that might have taken like 3, 6 months, 12 months, right? So we see this accelerated process because something magical happens when you put people in a community of, of other people that understand what they're going through, number one, so other patients, but number two, under the guidance of doctors that really understand what they're going through, not only like from a personal level, but also professionally understanding what's happening in their nervous system, which areas need support and what therapies are called for. Something beautiful happens. And I'd have to say, I know Dr. Schmo runs these camps too, and I'm pretty sure that was your experience, is just, because I think the majority of people and the majority of doctors too don't even necessarily think it's possible to heal from a concussion intentionally. It's more kind of like, yeah, well, let's just, wear these sunglasses. Yeah, give it time. Yep. There's nothing we can really do right now, but give it time. Here's some, painkillers to relieve your symptoms, to mask the symptoms, but give it time. So that's the thing. It's like, number one, not only is healing possible, and we can be really intentional with it. Number two, sometimes it can happen very rapidly and dramatically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know for me, I didn't get to Jeremy for 2.5 years. And I had been told, give it more time. Just nothing we can do. Give it time. Yeah, here's exactly. Some antidepressants. Yeah. And within like 2 or 3 days, he had my dizziness. Like he got my eyes working. And I mean, it was just boom.
Yeah.
A switch turned on. And I wasn't 100% at the end of my week. Yeah, no. I'm still not 100%. I'm 80, 90%. But I feel really good. And
exactly. Yeah. And that's the experience I have with so many of my patients who go through the brain camp. It's like I had actually this, I had a mother and daughter fly in from New York because the daughter, she was in high school and she had suffered multiple head injuries. And because they were so severe, she had to drop out of high school.
Wow.
And it wasn't like they weren't trying therapies. They saw the chiropractor, they saw vestibular rehab therapists, they saw neurologists, but nothing was working. And so they flew out from New York to our camp, and I did the evaluation, and pretty much within like the first visit, I was able to identify a very specific neural network breakdown related to eye movements, related to what we call velocity storage for those any practitioners watching out there. And within a matter of 10 days, her mom told me at the 10th day at the re-exam, she's like, we haven't seen results like this for 4 years. And in 10 days, we've seen more results than 4 years of therapy. I was just like, yeah, that's why I do what I do. That's why my team is just so dedicated. Every single person that comes, it's like, we are in it. We dive into it. And it's just such a magical experience.
Yeah. And it's so awesome. And like I said earlier, before we started recording, I wish I could clone some of you guys.
Yeah.
So Dr. Chiu, I just want to recap your book again. Is called Brain Save, the 6-week plan to heal your brain from concussions, brain injury, and trauma.
Yeah. And
they can find that on Amazon, correct?
Exactly.
And your website is brainsave.com.
You got it.
Yeah. So anyone, we'll have the links for you below the video, but definitely check out Dr. Chiu's book, check out his website for more resources. This has just been such a great conversation. I could talk to you for hours.
I know. It's been wonderful. Yeah, feel free to give me a call. Let's just chat. It's been such a pleasure. And yeah, thank you so much for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to share with everyone out there that there is hope. There's a lot that can be done to turn your brain health around.
Yeah. So thank you for being here, Dr. Chiu. And thank you everyone for watching. I hope you're enjoying the summit, and we'll see you in the next episode.